Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi Zevachim Daf Daled. We begin right on top. Up until this point, we spoke about the lishma requirement in a carbon. It must be processed for the proper purpose. So you have to have in mind that it's going to be for an oila. Actually, you have to say, right? Lishma means, according to Tesis in some places, lishma, the term indicates expression, verbal expression. So he's saying, I'm doing this for an oila, etc., etc. But if he mislabels the carbon, that's problematic. In fact, the Mishnah says, although the carbon, for the most part, is okay, except for the chatas and the pesach, etc. But typically, a carbon still remains kosher, but the owner has nothing from it. It's not going to be oila l'shem chayva. It doesn't really count, and it's not applied towards his obligation. He doesn't get credited for it. So the starting point here is that in fact lishma is a requirement, perhaps not critical, but it is required. Says the Gemara, how do we know? What do we find in the Torah? That we even require zvicha lishma, that the shchita of a carbon, which is the first of the four hakrava steps. You have the zvicha, you have the shchita, the kabbalas hadam, receiving the blood in the container. You have halacha, which is walking, carrying the blood towards the mizbeach, and you have the zrika, where you apply the dam, the blood on the mizbeach. So we're going to delineate all four sources for the four avodos, and show that it requires lishma. And lishma really has two aspects: lishma of the carbon, for the sake of this specific carbon, so an oila for an oila, etc. And also, you may not mislabel the owner as well. So if it's Ruvain's carbon, you're meant to have Ruvain in mind, and not Shimon. The pasuk says, Zevach, we learn in this case, refers to the actual zvicha. It teaches us that the actual ma'asa, the act, shtei zvicha of shchita, should be l'shem shlamim. Zevach should be l'shem shlamim. So you should have in mind that it's a shlamim. Asks the Gemara, how do we know that the word zevach here refers to the act of zvicha? V'dil mahani shmai, maybe it's just a label. That's what it's called. It's called zevach shlamim, rather than describing the act of zvicha. Well, so the Gemara looks like a you can't say as such. We have other psukim regarding the other activities of the hakrava, hamakrav is damashlamim, hazorik is damashlamim, and in those it doesn't say zevach hashlamim. Apparently, that's not really part of the actual name. Like zevach, it doesn't say hamakrav is dam zevach hashlamim. So there it doesn't, and here in our pasuk it says v'im zevach shlamim, v'achaksiv zevach shlamim. No, that indicates to us that the carbon itself is called shlamim. Zevach shlamim means the zvicha should be for the sake of a shlamim. Shtei zvicha l'shem shlamim. Okay, ashkan zvicha, you've established the source for shechita l'shem, the proper carbon. What about the other steps of hakrava? Shara v'yis minalan v'chitem. Perhaps we'll just learn it out of these zvicha, leilach mizvicha. Well, there's room to differentiate. Perhaps zvicha stands higher and has higher standards. Mal zvicha shekain nifseles or poiseles shaloi l'shem oichan bepesach. You see, in a carbon pesach hakrava process, one needs to have in mind that it's being prepared for one who can eat, a legal eater. Rashi says, a healthy person who could have a kazayis, rather than an ill person, etc., who cannot really consume a kazayis. And that halacha applies strictly to the shchita of the carbon pesach. So at the time of shchita, the intention has to be that it's being done for a healthy person who can eat from the carbon pesach, because after all, the carbon pesach is primarily intended for eating, right? So we find that the shchita aspect of the avodah has a certain strictness, a certain advantage, if you say, over other steps of the avodah. And perhaps that's why it requires the shema. You can't really draw from here to elsewhere. Ela makros, as the Gemara, we have a pasuk, hamakrav es damashlamim. Hamakrav here means the Kabbalah. Rabban Chumash learns that the word hakrava applies to kabbalas adam, because you're making the blood into a karva. Hakrava means to bring closer. It could be physical closeness, it could be spiritual closeness. You're elevating the blood of the animal and turning it into a carbon, suitable for application in the mizbeach, which brings atonement, which is the final culmination of the carbon process. So hamakriv in this case means the Kabbalah. Hamakriv is damashlamim. Why mention the word shlamim again? We know it's a shlamim from the previous Pesukim. Pasuk is telling us that's what he has in mind. Shtei Kabbalah l'shem shlam. Okay, so now we know the Shechita and the Kabbalah as well. Asks the Gemara, V'lichtoi v'rachmona b'Kabbalah. So why can't the Torah say it by the Kabbalah only? V'lei the Shechita mina. We'll learn the Shechita from Kabbalah. You can refute that comparison by saying, Mala Kabbalah, well, Kabbalah stands higher, Shkem Psula Bazar Isha. In contrast to Shechita, which even a non-Kohen can do, a woman can do, even if it's a carbon. Kabbalah can only be performed by a male Kohen. A Zar, a non-Kohen, is disqualified from Kabbalah, so is an Isha. So perhaps, due to its higher status, it requires Lishma as opposed to Shechita. So you need a pasuk for both, Shechita and Kabbalah. Okay, so Ashkechan, Shechita and Kabbalah, you've now discovered the source for both. Zrika Manol, what about Zrika? That needs Lishma. How do we know? Chitayim and Elif Mahani, perhaps. Leilif will learn from the other two. No, Malahani, Shechita and Saf, and Shechita and Kabbalah are unique in a sense that they're performed on the north side of the Mizbeh, of the Azara. Furthermore, those two steps are always required even on the karbanos chatas that are interior, that are whose blood is brought into the inside, the internal Mizbeach. So they also require the Shechita and the Kabbalah, like any other carbon, as opposed to Zrika. That element of the Hakrava process doesn't require tzafin. It's done on the Mizbeach itself, not on the north side of the area. And it's not applicable to the internal karbanos chatas, whose blood is placed on the internal Mizbeach. Right? So the standard Zrika on the external Mizbeach is not applicable to the internal karbanos. So perhaps, you can point to it as a sort of deficiency in the Zrika. It's not as weighty and as profound as Shechita and Kabbalah. So perhaps it doesn't require Lishma. Ela Makro, we have a pasuk, Hazurek is Damashlam. Hazurek is Damashlam tells us, Shtei Zrika for the sake of L'Shem Shlam. Okay, so why can't the Torah just state this halacha, this requirement by Zrika, and we'll learn the others from Zrika? You can refute that comparison by saying, Zrika stands higher than the rest, because if a non-Kohen performs Zrika, he gets Misa. As opposed to Shechita of Kabbalah, where there's no Misa. Rashi brings the Gemara in Yuma. Misa, death only applies to certain steps in the process, which are considered, completing steps, culmination steps, like the Zrika, which is the last and final step, as opposed to Shechita and Kabbalah, which are initial steps. There's no Misa for that. He can't do it, but there's no Misa. It's not as severe. So perhaps there's no Dinah Lishma. That's why we need a pasuk for Shechita, for Kabbalah, and for Zrika. They all require Lishma. Ashkan Chulu. Okay, you've established the source for all three. There's one more remaining. What about the Halacha, transporting the Dam to the Mizbech Minol? How do we know Lishma applies there as well? Perhaps we'll learn Halacha from the rest. No, Malakula Shekin Avoida Sheyev Shalavatla. There's something unique about the other three because they cannot be discounted. You can't not have a Shechita. You can't not have Kabbalah or Zrika, but you could ignore Halacha, for instance. Right? Toimar halacha shev shelavat, as opposed to halacha that could be discounted. For instance, if you do the shechita of the carbon right near the mizbeach, which allows you to do the zrika without even transporting. So halacha, by definition, is a discountable part of the process, so perhaps it doesn't stand as high, it doesn't have that same requirement. Elam Akra, we need a pasuk for halacha as well. So first there's a pasuk of V'hikra Esakal Mizbecha, take all the parts of the korban oilam, bring it to the Mizbech. We learn it's describing the process where they would transport the limbs of the animal up to the ram. We have another pasuk, V'tanya, V'krivu. V'krivu means V'kabbalas Hadam. So although the word akriva typically means you bring closer, you transport, you would think it's going on the halacha. No, we learn that it's going on the Kabbalah, like we said before. You're turning the blood into a carbon. And Rashi explains because it's stated right after the shechita. What happens right after the shechita? Kabbalah. So it's going on the Kabbalah. Where is there a reference to halacha at all? The choice of wording. Why did the Torah choose to describe halacha by using the term v'ikribu? Sorry, why did the Torah choose to describe the Kabbalah? Using the word v'ikrivu, which sounds like moving along and transporting. The Torah could have just said v'kiblu, right? The reason why the Torah, in fact, described the Kabbalah process using a halacha term to tell you, to indicate the halacha lo'tapka, that the halacha segment should not be separated miklal Kabbalah, from the act of Kabbalah. So although we're speaking about Kabbalah, but the Torah chose a term which denotes halacha to tell you that they're inseparable. And whatever applies to Kabbalah applies to halacha as well. Okay, so we established a source for shechita, for Kabbalah, for halacha, for zrika. They all require lishma. Va'ashi chashinu kodesh. Okay, that establishes the halacha regarding shinu kodesh. Don't mislabel the actual name of the korban. Va'ashi chashinu kodesh. Shinu ba'alim minala. What about if the korban was shechted for a different owner? How do we know? That's problematic. Amar Pinchas Breder Ami. Amar Kro, the pasuk says by a korban toida, which we bring as an expression of thanksgiving, Upsar Zevach Toida Shlomov. And the word Zevach here is extra to teach us Shtei Zvicha, the act of Shechita should be L'Shem Toida, for the sake of a Toida. Now, that seems to be superfluous. We already know if it's not needed to teach us regarding mislabeling the korban, we learn it from the sources upstairs, right? So, that's the rule. When there's something extra, we apply it to where it's needed. Apply it to the halacha of owner designation. So now we know the shechita was for the wrong owner, then it affects the korban. Is this pasuk talking about the halacha of mislabeling? This pasuk of Sar Zevach Teda Shlomov is needed for something else, as the Bryce explains. Look at the sign. Ubsar Zevach Teda Shlomov. Abba Chon explains Mishum in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. Bodelamed, it's coming to teach us. Toida sheshchata l'shem shlomim kshira. You see, a toida is really a subset of a shlomim. Shlomim is sort of father category, of which we have toida as a subset. Suppose he took the toida and he had in mind the shlamim. It's okay. Kshera. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Because it's sort of, it's a type of shlamim as well, right? But the other way around, shlamim, he took a standard shlamim, sheshchat and shem toida, and he shechted it for a toida, psula, then it's possible. That's called mislabeling. Why? What's the difference? Either way, it wasn't a proper designation. Mahefresh. What is the difference between one and the other? Answer is toida kriya shlamim. After all, a toida, although its designated name is toida, its specific name is toida, but it is a variation of shlamim. It's called shlamim as well, and that's why the name shlamim doesn't really act to its detriment. But ve'in shlamim kriyin toida, but the shlamim is never called a toida, and that's what we learn from this pasuk. B'sar zevach toidas shelamav. That toida, in a way, has the name Shlamim as well. So it's not really an extra pasuk, which you said it was. Says the Gemara, you're right, the words Toida Shlamim is not available because it already teaches us the other point. But not mi Zevachim, we will focus on the word Zevach. The word Zevach is extra to tell you that the actual Zvicha must be done with the right intention. But it's needed for something else. So we're speaking about the length of time, the duration of the achilas hakor. How long do you eat the carbon for? Per day and night. That applies to the toida, and that expiration date applies to chatas v'asham as well. How do we know? Chatas v'asham menayta. This very pasuk says uvsar zevach toida shlama, and the pasuk speaks about how long you eat the carbon for. And just as the toida only has a day and a night to be eaten, likewise the chatas v'asham because of zevach. So zevach is needed for something else in Cain, but the answer is, if it's only coming to tell us that, the pasuk would say it differently. It would sequence the word differently. Upsar toida shlama zevach. Put zevach at the end to cover the chatas v'asham in terms of the time frame. My zevach. Why is the word zevach indicated before? Zevach toida shlama. Shmamina, that allows us to learn all these halachas. To learn the halacha regarding the time frame of chatas v'asham, to learn regarding mislabeling the carbon. So now we know Ashkon Zvicha, we found the source that shchita must be done with the right owner in mind. Shar avodas minal, what about the other steps of the avodah, like the Kabbalah, the halacha, the zrika, v'chitem and elf mizvicha? Perhaps leilaf will learn from zvicha. No, mal zvicha, like we said before, has that extra advantage regarding the carbon pesach. Shekem paisel l'sholosh sh'ayim oichlin b'pesach, so you can't really compare to shchita. Tells the Gemara like this. We make a general comparison between, we spoke about two types of mislabeling. Shinui kodesh, where one mislabels the actual label of the carbon itself, and shinui bailim, the wrong owner. We compare the two, contexts. Nemra zvicha b'shinui kodesh, we find the Torah teaching us that the shchita cannot be mislabeled in terms of the carbon, like we said on top. But likewise, like we just said, you can't mislabel regarding the shchita as pertaining to the owner. We compare the two notes. So just like by shini kodesh, the zvicha is not limited to zvicha, because the halacha l'shma, we don't differentiate between shchita and the other steps of the avodah, like we said before. L'shma is a requirement by all four steps. Likewise, the halacha of lishma regarding the owner pertaining to zvicha is not limited to zvicha. It's a chalak ben zvicha. We don't differentiate between shchita, l'shar avodas, and the rest. Well, how do you compare the two forms of misdesignations? Malashin kodesh. There are several, actually 4 added components that we find by shini kodesh that are not found by shini baalim. Who's to say to put them on the same plane? Mala Shina Kodesh Shekem Psula Begufa. Shina Kodesh is an actual deficiency within the carbon itself. Right? You're mislabeling the carbon itself as opposed to Shini Bailam, which is relatively an external element. The owner, Furthermore, Yeshna Ba'arba Avodas. Shini Kodesh applies to all 4 steps. V'yeshni Ba'arba Avodas, because whether it was the Shchita, the Kabbalah, etc., etc. Shini Kodesh applies as opposed to Shini Bailam, explains Rashi. When you have the wrong owner in mind, you see, the owner, he gets the zrika. The point is that the kapara, which is actualized by the zrika, the atonement, that happens by the zrika. So, when we say that Shini Baalam applies to Shchita, it doesn't mean that he does the Shchita for the wrong owner. It means to say that he's thinking at the Shchita point that he's going to prepare the dam for Zrika for the other owner. So the Shchita is a preparatory act, precursor for the Zrika, which is going to be for the wrong owner. So it's not Shini Bailim in the Shchita per se, or in the Kabbalah per se. It all leads to the Zrika, which is the focal point of the carbon, which brings kapara to the owner. So, in essence, Shini Baalim is unique to the Zrika, as opposed to Shini Kodesh, which is an inherent element in all 4 avodas. Furthermore, V'yeshin lachar misa, as opposed to Shini Bailim, which only applies when the owner is still alive, because after they passed on, there's no Shini Bailim, there's no owner. In contrast to Shini kodesh that applies even after the owner died and the carbon is still here. You have to label it properly. And finally, v'yeshnei b'tzibur kivayachid. And Shini Kodesh applies to a public carbon, right? Just like it applies to a private carbon, as opposed to Shini Bailam, explains Rashi. If it's a public carbon, Shini Bailam doesn't take effect. There's no notion of Shini Bailam. Everybody owns it, right? You take a carbon tzibur, a tambid, and you have in mind, well, only him and not him. Well, everybody's the owner. Now, although we cited 4 seeming, advantages in Shini Kodesh over Shini Bailam, Vavgav the Tati LiveDafka, if you break it down and boil it down, really you can argue that 2 of these factors are not really necessarily so, as we're going to see soon. But you know what? Even if you discount 2, you still have 2 left. Tati Adavka, you still have 2 that are still true. Because really you can challenge. Maishna Shini Bailam Lev Absolute Begufay. Why are you considering Shini Bailam as not inherent in the carbon? Machshava Ba'alma, because there's no wrong act done in the carbon itself. It was only his notion, his thinking, his intention. So you are considering that an external element. Well, guess what? Shini Kodesh Nami. Even Shini Kodesh, where he's mislabeling the actual designation of the carbon itself, after all, it wasn't expressed in the act. There's nothing wrong with the act, except what's machshava ba'almahu. It's not like he ruined the carbon in terms of, he was just thinking and saying. So basically, they're both on the same level. Shini Bailam is external, so is Shini Kodesh. Ella, rather you must say, Kivan Achshava, once he has that thought, or as Tosha says, word that he expressed that intention. Pasla, so he disqualified the carbon. In the case of the Shini Kodesh, Achanami resolved by Shini Bailam, the same thing. Given the Achshva Pasla, once he had that in mind, the carbon becomes disqualified. So basically, there's no room to differentiate. Well, this is in the carbon, this is outside the carbon. They're both either in or out. So that sort of discounts this discrepancy between Shini Kodesh and Shini Bailam. And there's another element as well that you mentioned, La'achar Misa. Truthfully, says the Gemara, Rav Pinchas Beder of Murray, according to him, the Amar, who says, Yesh Shini Bailam La'achar Misa, even after the owner of the carbon died, and the carbon is still here, ready for Akrava, one may not misdesignate its owner. It still relates to its owner, although he's not here anymore. So, according to this, there's no advantage to Shini Kodesh over Shini Bailam. They both apply equally, Lachar Misa. So that discounts, 2 seeming advantages, but you're still left with 2. Tartamiyah equal mifrach. It's still a challenge. Your attempt at equating Shini Kodesh with Shini Bailam by drawing the line between the 2 and pointing to 2 advantages inherent in Shini Kodesh, not found in Shini Bailam. So how can you compare? Elo Marav Ashi. So back to the search. How do we know that Shini Bailam is an issue in anything other than the Shechita, which we have a pasuk for? What about the rest of the Avodah? So Akrovi have a pasuk by the Oil of Nitzalei Alav. Alav. It has to be for him. V'lo Chaver, as opposed to having the other fellow in mind. And the pasuk is speaking about the Zrika of the Dam. V'nirtzalei Ritzui means the kapara, the atonement, which happens through the Zrika. So we see that Zrika needs to be l'shem, the proper owner. Asks the Gemara, V'hai lochi do'asa? The word alav is coming for this purpose. Haim beiluk the san is needed for something else. V'nirtzalei l'chaper alav, says Reb Shimon. Until a point is one responsible for the well-being of his carbon. Let's say it gets lost or stolen. Shimon oime esha alav. If it's upon the owner, I promise to bring a carbon, then he's chaybach riyusai. He's responsible to replace it if something happens. But if it's not upon him, he donated this carbon and he walked away. He doesn't have to look at it. He is not responsible if something happens. How do we know? My time away. When you make a neder, a personal vow, you are responsible. A lie. By saying Harei alai, it's commander torn le'akat. It's like he's riding the animal on his shoulder, or riding the obligation. Putting it on his shoulder means to say that it's a personal obligation. And that's learned from L'chaper Olav. It becomes very personal. So it's unavailable to teach us Rav Ashi's halacha that you can't mislabel the owner. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi, both can be learned from the same pasuk. Rav Ashi mevenir tzalei l'chaper ka'amar. Rashi was focused on the first part of the pasuk. Loi l'chaper. It's for him a kapar, only for this owner. You can't confuse and mix up the owners. Okay, so now we have a pasuk for shchita and for zrika. Ashkan zvicha zrika. Kabbalah we know. What about Kabbalah for the right owner? How do we know? It's required. Perhaps you can learn from the other two. No, there's something unique about those two. If those acts were performed outside the Beis HaMikdash, there's kares punishment applicable. If they're done to a carbon outside the Mikdash, as opposed to Kabbalah, which Rashi brings, doesn't generate kares. So perhaps it's not on the same level, it doesn't have the same halachas. Elo Rav Ashi. Ashi me El Nazir, we learn from a carbon called El Nazir that Nazir brings. He makes the ayil into a Zevach Shlom. What does that mean? They actually process. He processes the carbon for the sake of Shlomim. Now, we already know regarding, focusing on the name of the carbon, that's required. We have, sources for that. It's unnecessary for that. So, if it's not needed for that, we shift it to where it's needed. If this pasuk is not needed for L'shini Kodesh regarding mislabeling the name of the carbon itself, Nafkali Mehosim, we already have sources up on the other side of our daf, right? Now, in L'shini Bayin, apply it regarding mislabeling the owner. And that requirement applies equally to all four avodos. Amalei, right, including the Kabbalah. Amalei Rav Achbar Rabba L'Rava. How could you say that it's going to cover all the avodos? Really, this pasuk can be broken down into a klal and prat, a generalization and a specification. So basically, when you have a klal followed by a prat, a general term followed by a specific term, you have to restrict the general term and only apply it in a very strict way, as per the specific term, right? So, anyway, let's configure the pasuk like this. Yasa Zevach Shlomim? Sure, Yasa is a klal that all steps of the process need to be L'Shem Shlomim, but the word Zevach is a very specific shchita term, prat, indicates that only shchita has that requirement. So when you have a klal followed by a prat, klal prat, ein b'chlal of mashav prat. The klal only refers to the item alluded to in the prat, which is the shchita, zvicha, and only the zvicha needs to be L'Shem, the owner. But not the other steps. So how could you spread it broadly? So he says like this: Iksiv Yasa Shlom Zevach. If the pasuk would say it like that, Yasa, general, should make everything properly for a Shlomim, and then say Zevach, which is a specific term referring only to limiting it only to the Shechita. But the Ga'amris, then yeah, it would sound like a klal and a prat. But now, Hashd Chsiv, it doesn't say it like that. It says it Yasa Zevach Shlomim. So Yasa is the general. But general what? We're making everything for what? It doesn't say what. It's an incomplete expression. Because Shlomim is only said later. Yasa Zevach, then Shlomim. We're not sure what the Yasa is for. What's he having in mind with the Yasa? So it's a klal, right? If it's Yasa Zevach Shlomim, it makes it an incomplete Yasa. So it's Havali klal. The word Yasa, which is a klal, is klal sheni moli. It's an incomplete klal. And when it's an incomplete klal, ain't done an oiseh b'chal prat, this formula doesn't apply. So back to the earlier notion that the word Yasa, in fact, covers all the acts, all these steps of the Akrava. Ravina Amar, I'll tell you another teretz. Lo'ilum danan. Truthfully, Yasa can be a klal, Zevach can be a prat. As to your question, it would seem that it's limited to only to the Zvicha. No, we have another word in the pasuk, La Hashem. V'la Hashem chazav v'kol, the word La Hashem. That everything in this carbon has to be for Hashem, with the right kavanah, the right purpose. So Hashem is a general term referring to everything in this carbon. Chazav v'kol, that's again back to generalization. that is applicable to all 4 steps, where Lishma is required. How could you say it's a klal prat klal? You're saying klal prat klal covers pretty, everything, right? General, specific, then back to general, everything's covered. But if you compare the 2 general terms, the first klal, yasa, to the last klal, Hashem, there's a discrepancy between the 2. They're not on the same plane. The first klal, the word yasa, covers the 4 specific, unique steps that turn the carbon into a carbon, right? Shchita, Kabbalah, Hilach, and Zrika. That makes it into a carbon. V'suloi, and no more, right? It just covers those. Klal Basra. But the last klal, the Lashem, is not limited to just 4. Kol Lashem. It alludes to anything. That's for Hashem. Afilu shvichas shiraim v'aktoras emurin. It alludes to everything that's done. Even spilling of the leftover blood on the Mizbeach, which is not a critical part of the Avodah, and aktoras emurin, burning of the fats in the Mizbeach. Because, after all, it is part of the process. It's not a critical part. It's not vital. So we have sort of an unevenness between the 2 expressions. This klal is limited to the 4 steps, and the last klal covers everything. The answer is, still, we find that Tanur Bishmoel regarding klals and prats allows this to go through as well as a klal prat klal. Dorish kai gavna, klal prat klal, even in this type of discrepancy, he considers it a klal prat klal, in which case we apply the system of iyata dan elakain aprat. It can only cover and include something which is reminiscent of the specific term, which in this case is the zevach, right? The word zevach, ma'aprat, just like the word zevach, mefoirish avoida is expressed as something which is an avoida, ubein on lishman and requires lishman afkol avoida ubein lishman. Likewise, any other element of the actual avoida, i.e., of the 4 critical steps, ubein lishman requires lishman. But the shirayim and the emurin are not really part of the avoida per se, not the main part of the avodah, and therefore it doesn't need lishma. Okay, so although the pasuk will generate a klal prat klal, but it's going to cover all the main primary parts of the avodah, where mislabeling is a problem, as opposed to the secondary activities, where mislabeling doesn't disqualify. Ima prat mefurish avodah. Hold it 1 second. Before you spread your wings and cover all 4 avodas, perhaps you can define the prat a bit differently. The prat here is the zrika, is the shchita. What defines the shchita? It's an avodah, right? Furthermore, if that act is done on a carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash, it's kares. So perhaps that element should be used as a precedent regarding what you want to include. It also will cover, the halacha of the Shmuel will also cover only avodas which are chay b'chutz, which is limited to shchita, uzrika, in only those 2. Need lishma. Kabbalah v'halacha, but perhaps Kabbalah v'halacha, which don't have that quality, won't have lishma. Won't have the lishma requirement. Inami, or you can say, so basically according to this approach, shchita and zrika are in, Kabbalah v'halacha are out. Inami, you can say a bit differently. What defines the shchita? It's done on the north of the Mizbeach. And it also applies on the internal carbonates chatas v'chtais hapnimis. It's only something that has that quality, those qualities. Avkalaton sofin v'yeshna v'chtais hapnimis needs to be done l'shma, and that would cover shchita v'kabbalah. Those 2 are in. Hazrika loy, but not the zrika. So basically, we're asking from 2 directions. Klal prat to klal, sure, but it has to be comparable to the prat. So according to the first suggestion, the way we define the prat will only allow us to cover shchita and zrika, not kabbalah v'halacha. According to the second approach, it only covers shchita and kabbalah and not zrika. Says the Gemara, guess what? So even you're agreeing that you can go both ways. If you learn it one way, you cover one thing. You learn the other way, and then you cover something else and exclude the zrika. Then shkulim him. So either you're excluding the zrika, or you're excluding the kabbalah. Shkulim him. Really, they're on the same level now. Because which way should we choose? Why should we push out one over the other? You go one way, you push out the, you include the zrika and push out the kabbalah. Go the other way, you push out the zrika and include the kabbalah. You have Rosh names, you have to include them both. You can't. We have no right to push anybody out if we can't really substantiate it. There's another version which is pretty much the same idea. V'chada take a milsa, so leave every one of them in their place, unless proven otherwise. Okay, so inevitably everything has to be included, because we have no proof, we have no right to push one out over the other one. Another answer to your question: how do we know that zrika is going to be covered? Zrika mit Ravashi nafka. That was the pasuk Ravashi presented. V'nir tzaloi l'chaper olav. Right, further up on the Amid, that l'chaper, the kapara, which is expressed by the zrika, must be done with the right owner in mind. Okay, so now we know everything. We have the halacha of shini bailam, which means to say that you have to have the right owner in mind. That requirement applies to shchita. That applies to zrika, right? To kabbalah, and to halacha. Now, we spoke about shchita based on the pasuk over here. B'sar zevach tegas shlomav. We actually had another pasuk over here in Amud Beis from the Ayel Nazar, right? This Ayel Yasa Zevach Shlom, that is Zvicha. So shchita was covered from all sides. In terms of zrika and kabbalah, that we had the again the pasuk of Ayel Yasa Zevach Shlom. We had the klal prat to klal. Regarding the shchita, we also had the pasuk of Ravashi. What about halacha, by the way? So Rashi says that once Kabbalah is included, halacha is inseparable. Like we said earlier, halacha and Kabbalah are sort of two sides of the same coin. So whatever applies to Kabbalah, the Lishma requirement applies to halacha as well. Okay, so once we've established all this, says the Gemara, Ashkan Ayel Nazir. So sure, this drasha that we had was on the carbon of the Nazir. What about Shar Shlomim and all? What about other Shlomims? Who's to say they have this din of Lishma as well? Chitei Manelef, Me'el Nazir, perhaps we can learn other Karbanei Shlomim from the El Nazir, which requires the proper owner designation. Well, Mal El Nazir is different. Shekain Yeshim Adam Macherim. There are other blood, so to speak, other Karbanes brought together with the, the Nazir brings multiple Karbanes. With his Ayel, he brings Echatas and Ayla, so perhaps that's why it's more strict, because it's a part of a general package, but just a lone Karban, who says that has this requirement? Imkain. Answers the Gemara, if that was the case. Nichtav Shlamav. The pasuk would say, V'sa'ayil yasa zevach Shlamav, if it's unique to his Shlamim. My Shlamim. Why does it say Shlamim, which is a general term referring to all types of Shlamims? L'Rabbis call Shlamim to cover all types of Shlamims which need Lishma, the shame, the proper owner. Ashkan Shlamim. So now we have a source for all Shlamims. Sh'ar, Kol Kachim Minola. What about all other Karbanis? Who says this then applies there as well? Perhaps you can learn other Karbanis from Shlamim. No, Shlamim has added strictnesses. Mal Shlamim Shekain to it. In Smicha, you have to lean on the Shlamim as part of the process. You lean and you confess. When Sacham, the wine, the oil that you bring together with these Shlamim. Utnuva Haschad V'Shoik. The part of the chaz of the shaykh has to be waived. That's unique to a karban shlama, so perhaps it's more weighty than other karbanis. Okay, so all these halachos, whether it's Shini Kodesh discussed way back, beginning of today's daf, or Shini Bailam, which we're currently discussing, perhaps these are unique to Karbanis Shlamim. Right? Zevachim Karbanai. Yes, right? Yes, Zevachim. Elam Akra, we have a pasuk in Vayikra Zayin, which ties it all together. Zois HaTorah, we have a pasuk which discusses, which gives us a comprehensive list of all Karbanis. La'olav la'mincha, v'la'chatas v'la'asham la'mluim, v'la'chashlamim. Hikisha nakasa l'shlamim. Here the pasuk connects all the other Karbanis to Shlamim to tell us ma shlamim. Bein shini kodesh, bein shini bailam, bein l'shma. Just like by a carbon shlamim, whether it's pertaining to mislabeling the carbon itself or misdesignating the owner, it's a no, right? It requires the shma. Av koil, bein shini kodesh, bein shini bailam, bein l'shma. Likewise, regarding other Karbanis, l'shma is a requirement regarding the carbon itself or its owner. Well, says the Gemara, okay, Amos, and then we'll say, if you have in mind the wrong thing, it should be possible. And why does the Mishnah say the carbon remains kosher? Amakra, that's what we have the other pasuk, right? The Neder and Dava pasuk that we had back on that base. Pasuk says, Amakra moitzas tishmar. Keep your word, keep your promise. Vasisa, carry it through, as you had promised. And a Neder, as we said, means, I am committed, harei alai. And the pasuk continues with the words, Nedava. Now, which one? Is it a neder? Is it a nedava? Hi, nedava. Why is the pasuk referring to as a nedava neder? It's really a neder. Ella, the pasuk is telling you. Both options are on the table. Depends how it was processed. In fact, you carried out the process the way you promised properly. Then it counts as your neder, and you get credit for it. But otherwise, if it was done shalei lishma, so although it's still a carbon, it becomes a nedava. You have to replace it. You have to bring another carbon to make up for it. Says the Gemara, "V'israch moitzas vasecha, v'israch zois HaTorah." Now we have two psukim regarding the Shema, zois HaTorah and moitzas vasecha. Why do we need two psukim for the same thing? V'israch moitzas vasecha, v'israch zois HaTorah. Each one tells us something else. Because Rachmana moitza, if only the pasuk of moitza, I would say lo yada ma'ka amar kas Rachmana. Keep your word. To what extent? What do you mean? It doesn't say do it lishma. Because Rachmana, comes the next pasuk and says, all karbanos are equated to shlamim, which has the lishma requirement. Because Rachmana, the pasuk will not say it that way. I would say livsilo. Lishma is so critical, it's so vital that it disqualifies the carbon if not done properly. Because Rachmana, Torah comes back and says to tell you that even if it's not done 100%, it can still be kosher and it counts as a nedava. Okay, so in a nutshell, we have all the sourcings for the halacha of the Shema on two levels: Shini Kodesh and Shini Bailam. Keeping focused on the type of carbon and also on the proper owner. It applies to Shlamim, which is sort of the starting point, and then spreads to all carbonis as well. And although it's required, but even if it's Shlei Lishma, the Mishnah says the carbon is still going to be kosher, although it won't count for its owner. All the best to you, and Atzlacha Rab.